everyone, welcome to Chapter 4 of The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. Chapter 4, the first principle in the science of getting rich. Thought is the only power which can produce tangible riches from the formless substance. The stuff from which all things are made is a substance which thinks. A thought of form is in this substance produces the form. Original substance moves according to its thoughts. Every form and process you see in nature is the visible expression of a thought in the original substance. As it thinks of a form, it takes that form. As it thinks of a motion, it makes that motion. That is the way all things were created. We live in a thought world, and this world is a part of the thought universe. The thought of moving universe extended throughout the formless substance. The thinking stuff resulted from that thought took the form of systems of planets and continues to maintain that form. Thinking substance takes the form of its own thought and moves according to the thought. Holding the idea of a circling system of suns and worlds, it took the form of these bodies and moved them accordingly. Although centuries may be required to do the work, by thinking the form of a slow-growing tree, the formless substance produces the tree. In creating, the formless substance seems to move according to the lines of motion it has established. The thought of an oak tree does not cause the instant formation of a full-grown tree, but it does start in motion the forces which will produce the tree along with established lines of growth. Every thought of form held in thinking substance causes the creation of that form, but always, or at least generally, along the lines of growth and action already established. If the thought of a house of a certain construction were impressed upon the formless structure, it might not cause the instant formation of that house, but it would cause the turning of creative energies already working in trade and commerce into such channels as to result in the speedy building of the house. And if therefore were no existing channels through which the creative energy could work, the house would be formed directly from primal structure, without waiting for the slow process of the organic and inorganic world. No thought of form can be impressed upon the original substance without causing the creation of that form. A human being is a thinking center and can originate original thought. All the forms that that person fashions in his hands must first emerge from thought. He cannot shape a thing until he has thought that thing. And so far, man has confined his efforts wholly to the work of his hands. He has applied manual labor to the world of forms, seeking to change or modify already existing forms. He has never thought of trying to cause the creation of new forms by impressing his thoughts upon the formless structure. When a person has a thought form, he takes material from the forms of nature and makes an image the form of which is in his mind. He has so far made little or no effort to cooperate with the formless intelligence to work with the Father. He has not dreamed that he can do what he sees the Father doing. Man reshapes and modifies existing forms by manual labor. He has not considered the question of whether he could produce things from the formless substance by communicating his thoughts for it. I propose to prove that he may do so, to prove that any man or woman may do so, and to show how. My first step will be to lay down three fundamental propositions. First, we assert that there is one original formless substance from which all things are made. All the seemingly many elements are only different presentations of one element. All the many forms found in organic and inorganic nature are only different shapes made from the same stuff. And this stuff is thinking stuff. A thought held in it produces the form of the thought. Thought and thinking substance produces shapes. A human being is a thinking center capable of original thought. If a person can communicate his thought to original thinking substance, he can cause the creation or formation of the thing he thinks about. To summarize this, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imagined by the thought. A person can form things in his thoughts, and by impressing his thoughts upon formless structure, can cause the thing he thinks about to be created. I can prove these statements by both logic and experience, reasoning back from the phenomena of form and thought. I come to one original thinking substance, and reasoning forward from this thinking substance, I come to the individual's power to cause the formation of one thing that he thinks about. By experiment, I find this reasoning to be true, and this is my strongest proof. If one person who reads this book gets rich by doing what I tell him to do, that is evidence in support of my claim. Furthermore, if every person who does what I tell him to do gets rich, that is positive proof that until someone goes through the process and fails, the theory is true until the process fails, and this process will not fail because every person who does exactly what I tell them to do will get rich. I have said that an individual gets rich by doing things in a certain way. In order to do so, a person must become able to think in a certain way. A person's way of doing things is the direct result of the way he thinks about things. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. This is the first step towards getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth, regardless of appearances. Every person who has the natural and inherent power to think of what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances. To think according to appearances is easy. To think truth, regardless of appearances, is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work a person has to perform. There is no labor from which most people shrink as they would do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind which observes it. This can only be prevented by holding the thought of truth. To look upon the appearance of disease will produce the form of disease in your own mind, and ultimately in your body. Instead, you must hold the thought of the truth, which is that there is no disease. Disease is only an appearance, and the reality is health. To look upon the appearance of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind. Instead, you must hold the truth that there is no poverty, there is only abundance. It requires power to think when surrounded by appearances of disease, or to think riches when in the midst of appearances of poverty. But he who acquires this power becomes a mastermind. He can conquer fate, he can have what he wants. This power can only be acquired by getting hold of the basic fact, which is beyond all appearances, that there is one thinking substance from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that a person can impress his thoughts upon it so that to cause them to take form and become visible things. When we realize this, we lose all doubt and fear because we know that we can create what we want to create. We can get what we want to have, and we can become what we want to be. As a first step towards getting rich, you must believe the three fundamental statements given previously in this chapter. In order to emphasize them, I will repeat them here. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imagined by the thought. A person can form things in his thought, and by impressing his thought upon formless structure, can cause the thing he thinks about to be created. You must lay aside all other concepts of the universe than this monistic one. You must dwell upon this until it is fixed in your mind and has become your habitual thought. Read this creed statements over and over again. Fix every word upon your memory and meditate upon them until you firmly believe what they say. If a doubt comes to you, cast it aside as sin. Do not listen to arguments against this idea. Do not go to churches or lectures where contrary concept of things is taught or preached. Do not read magazines or books which teach a different idea. If you get mixed up in your faith, all efforts will be in vain. Do not ask why these efforts are true, nor speculate as to how they can be true. Simply take them on trust. The science of getting rich begins with absolute faith, absolute acceptance of this faith. That's chapter 4. See you tomorrow for chapter 5.